She attempted to embarrass a black student because of how she read aloud. However, what followed compelled an entire school and its community to finally face an issue that had been overlooked for far too long. No one in room 214 expected what that morning held. The fluorescent lights hummed quietly above, the heat blowing too forcefully from an aging vent in the corner. Seventh grade English was midway through its first period, with most students more interested in fighting off sleep than anything else. Zoe Brooks sat in the third row, her long braids tied back in a low ponytail, hands resting calmly on her copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She was the type of student teachers usually admired: quiet, respectful, consistently prepared. Yet with Ms. Harlow, none of that seemed to make a difference. "Let's continue from where we stopped yesterday," the teacher said while flipping through her worn copy of the book. "Zoe, why don't you read the next paragraph?" Zoe's voice was gentle but distinct. She read deliberately, enunciating each word as if it truly mattered, and in her heart, it did. She genuinely enjoyed this book, although she disliked how Ms. Harlow often appeared irritated when she spoke. But before she could finish the sentence, Ms. Harlow interrupted. "Zoe," she said loudly enough for the whole room to sense the shift. "This is not one of those street corner rap battles. Try to sound like someone who was genuinely educated." The words landed with a strange weight. Not loud, but sharp and definitive, like a final blow. Something had been thrown out there, not just spoken aloud. A few students blinked in surprise. One boy at the back quietly muttered a low "damn" under his breath. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat, pretending to dig through his backpack. The atmosphere tightened, very tightly. Zoe Brooks stood frozen, her lips parted briefly, then shut again. Her gaze was fixed on the page, but the words blurred together. She said nothing, simply stared downward, as if the book might somehow swallow her whole. Ms. Harlow remained at the front, arms crossed, peering over her glasses as if she had just corrected a minor mistake, like Zoe had mispronounced a single word, not been reduced to a stereotype in front of 30 classmates. The silence lingered far too long. Not a single student laughed, not because they wished to hold back, but because they had no clue how to respond. It was not humorous. It did not even feel like a joke. It carried a different weight, something heavier. Zoe slowly lowered her book. A peer, Jamie Grant, glanced toward her, then at the teacher, and back once more. She said nothing aloud, but her eyes conveyed that this was wrong. Ms. Harlow did not shift her stance. She stood as if daring anyone to oppose her. She had taught at Pinebrook for many years, longer than most had even been alive, and she had that way of looking at people like they were the problem if they failed to share her perspective. Yet she was unprepared for what came next. From the rear corner, where sunlight slanted in through a crooked window pane, a chair scraped slowly and deliberately across the linoleum. Marcus Penn rose to his feet. He was tall for his age, thin, always sporting the same worn-out sneakers and an oversized sweatshirt. He rarely spoke, never stirred up trouble, and constantly had a sketch pad on his lap, even when he was not supposed to. All heads turned toward him. He did not raise his hand or ask for permission. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Ms. Harlow and said, "You do not speak to anyone like that." The room fell silent. He added, "She reads better than most students here, and you know it. You said that because she is black." No one moved. Ms. Harlow stared at him, blinking slowly. Her mouth opened slightly but then closed. Zoe Brooks did not look up, but you could see her shoulders trembling a little, her fingers gripping the edge of her desk tightly. Someone near the front let out a low whistle. It was not meant as disrespect, but as disbelief, as if they were witnessing something unimaginable in a classroom. Marcus did not flinch or sit down. He remained standing, calm but firm, his hands at his sides, his voice steady as if he had been waiting for a reason to speak. For a moment, the power in the room shifted. Even when the atmosphere relaxed, something invisible had already cracked open. Ms. Harlow adjusted her glasses as if she had not fully heard Marcus. She glanced around the room, her lips pressed tight, her jaw tense. She disliked being challenged, especially by a student, and even more so by a black boy she had underestimated. She had never really paid close attention before. "What did you say?" she asked quietly and sharply. Marcus did not repeat his words. He did not need to. The room had already caught the message. The atmosphere still held it. "That sentence was meaningless," I said. "Let me be clear from the start. What you said to Zoe was both racist and disrespectful. You were fully aware of your actions." He was not shouting, and somehow that made it even more unsettling. His voice was surprisingly composed given the turmoil he was stirring. He sounded more like an instructor than the teacher who was supposed to be in charge at the front. Ms. Harlow squinted her eyes. "I will speak with you after class," she said dismissively. Yet her words missed the intended impact. It no longer sounded like authority. It felt like a thread beginning to unravel. Then Jamie spoke quietly, not standing, simply murmuring, "He's right," just loud enough for several to hear. Soon, another voice joined. Dave Ruckley, normally silent, always tardy, often half asleep, muttered, "That was intense, Ms. Harlow." This was not an uprising or open defiance, but it was enough to shake her. "All right, enough." She tried to regain control. Grabbing the marker, she began writing on the whiteboard, but her hand betrayed her and shook. No one paid attention to the board. Every eye was locked on Marcus, still standing, still silent. Zoe finally lifted her gaze. Her expression was vacant, yet her eyes revealed everything: uncertainty, shame, and perhaps something deeper as well. Gratitude, or perhaps a feeling of guilt for being the reason Marcus had to do what none of them dared. He glanced at her only once. That was enough. Then he took his seat just like nothing had happened. As if the moment was not his to hold, as if he had not just exposed something that no one else had the bravery to confront. The rest of the class dragged on slowly. No one opened their books again. Ms. Harlow handed out a worksheet she had not prepared for. Busy work, simply to pass the time. Her tone remained steady, yet she avoided looking at anyone in the eyes. She kept smoothing her skirt every few minutes as if the fabric could mend what had been shattered. Zoe did not touch the worksheet. She remained still throughout the entire period, her pencil in hand but completely motionless. She did not shed a tear, nor did she blink much. She was simply there, like someone caught midway between two doors, unsure of which one to choose. The bell rang sharply at 9:50. The sound cut through the silence. The students left the room quickly, whispering and throwing glances over their shoulders. Some gave Marcus a quiet pat on the shoulder as they passed by, swift and discreet, as though they did not want to be seen but could not leave without acknowledging him. Jamie waited by the door for Zoe, then walked beside her wordlessly. "Ms." Harlow called Marcus's name softly. He stopped. "I will need to speak with your parents," she said without meeting his eyes. "You probably should talk to hers first," he answered. Without waiting for a reply, he turned and left, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. With his arm tucked in, he disappeared into the flow of students in the hallway. Down in the cafeteria, whispers were already circulating. In the gym, the news spread through phone calls and texts. During the passing period, it traveled quickly. It was not only about what had been said, but also about who finally dared to respond. By lunchtime, conversations had extended beyond the students. Some teachers had started to take notice as well. When the lunch bell rang, Pine Brook Junior High felt different. It was not louder or chaotic, just altered, as if everyone was pretending normalcy while secretly glancing over their shoulders to see who else was aware. In the teacher's lounge, the microwave beeped as leftover spaghetti spun behind steamed glass. Ms. Lantry, the 8th grade math teacher, stirred her coffee but did not drink it. She had already heard about what had happened in Jamie Grant's class that morning. "Did you hear about it?" she asked casually to Mr. Whitaker, the physical education instructor, who was poking at his salad as if it had offended him. He replied with a grunt. The student called her out. Brave move. She actually said that about street corners and rap battles. That's the story I got. Neither of them chuckled. Meanwhile, near the lockers by the science wing, groups of students gathered in tight circles, whispering behind backpacks and open lockers. "Do you think he is going to be suspended?" one boy asked. "For what?" a girl responded. He did not curse at her. He simply spoke the truth. However, teachers dislike feeling humiliated. Marcus sat at the far end of one of the long cafeteria tables, munching on a bag of chips as if nothing was unusual. Despite that, his phone kept buzzing constantly. Snap notifications flooded the screen with group chats exploding. He chose to ignore all of them. Jamie slid into the seat opposite him and placed a peanut butter sandwich down. "Are you all right?" she asked, biting her lip slightly. He shrugged. "I'm fine. People are talking." I figured she must be angry. You know that, right? I know. Marcus took another chip and chewed slowly. Zoe had not appeared for lunch. Her closest friend said she went to the nurse's office claiming she felt unwell, but everyone understood the real reason. In the guidance office, Ms. Rowena Glasper sat with Zoe on the sofa near the window, clutching tissues tightly in her hand. She had not shed many tears, just a few that were enough to make her want to hide. "I did not do anything wrong," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. "No, you did not," Ms. Glasper responded gently. "I am proud of you for coming here to speak. She humiliated me in front of everyone. I know she did, and that was not right." Zoe blinked quickly, and then stared at the floor. "I just do not want people to see me as the problem." "They will not," Ms. Glasper assured her. Even she did not sound certain. Further down the corridor, Mr. Lamont, the assistant principal, was speaking on the phone inside his office. The door was closed, but anyone passing by could tell he was engaged in conversation. Passing by, one could notice the tone in his voice. Tense, restrained, and carefully chosen. The kind adults use when they are trying not to let emotions burst out too quickly. By the 7th period, the story had shifted countless times. Some claimed Marcus cursed at her. Others said he threw a desk. Another version described him flipping her book to the floor. However, the students who were actually present knew exactly what he had said. For the first time, the hallways felt less like a place to forget what happened in class. This day was different. Even the janitor, Mr. Bernal, who usually kept to himself and moved quietly through the halls like a shadow, stopped by Marcus's locker during the last period. "You did something right today," he said simply. "That matters." Marcus did not respond, only gave a slight nod before closing his locker. In the teacher's lounge, Ms. Harlow sat by the window, untouched lunch before her. Her jaw moved as if chewing, but her plate remained full. She gazed out toward the field behind the school. You could see her blinking hard, not tears, but steadying herself. Mrs. Coulson, the librarian, came in and sat 2 seats away. "You know you crossed a line this morning," she said. "No bitterness, just truth." "I was correcting her," Ms. Harlow answered without inflection. "No, you were revealing something you never faced." Ms. Harlow said nothing, just focused on her meal still untouched. Yet by the time the final bell sounded, the question was no longer if the school was aware. It was what actions they intended to take. By 3:20 p.m., the parking lot outside Pine Brook Junior High appeared busier than normal. It was not noisy, but heavy with an unspoken tension. A handful of parents remained by their vehicles, conversing quietly. The kind of hushed talk that lingers in the air, even when not everyone is meant to hear it. Inside the main office, Mrs. Reams at the reception desk had already printed 2 copies of the incident reports. She did not need any instructions. She understood this situation was not going to settle quietly. Zoe Brooks arrived first. She came directly from work, still wearing her blue scrubs, her identification badge clipped to her top, and her hair secured in a bun that showed signs of a long shift. She moved through the office with deliberate steps, neither rushing nor drawing attention, but her gait clearly communicated, "Do not try to test me today." "Where is the principal?" she inquired without taking a seat. "He is with the assistant principal," Mrs. Reams replied softly while standing up. "Let me see." Zoe made no gestures of acknowledgement. She neither nodded nor smiled. Instead, she simply stood waiting. Soon after, the door opened, and Principal Derek Voss appeared. He looked exhausted. His glasses slipped up high on his nose, and his loosened tie suggested he had been tugging on it all day. "Mrs. Brooks," he greeted, offering his hand. "Please come inside the office." She refrained from sitting until invited. Even then, she perched at the edge of the chair as if sitting was an insult. Zoe Brooks wanted to feel at ease immediately. "I need to know exactly what was said to my daughter," she started firmly. Principal Voss folded his hands calmly and replied, "We are still gathering the full story." "Are you saying a teacher embarrassed her in front of the entire class?" "You have had her in your school for 2 years. Has she ever been disrespectful or troubled anyone?" "No, sir," Zoe answered. "Then why was she not protected?" Voss hesitated briefly before admitting, "You have every reason to be upset." "No, I am not upset," Tanya corrected him sharply. "I am furious because my daughter came home unwilling to talk. When she finally spoke, she asked if she sounded ghetto. That word hung in the air." Voss visibly recoiled at the remark. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Penn, Omari's father, received a call around 4:10 in the afternoon. Still dressed in his post office uniform after finishing his early shift, Marcus entered the office, his sturdy figure filling the doorway. Omari sat silently in a chair holding a sketchbook in his lap, not drawing but clutching it for comfort. Principal Voss greeted him with a formal tone. "Mr. Penn, thank you for coming." Marcus first looked at his son and asked, "Are you all right?" Omari gave a slow nod. "Tell me your side of what happened," Marcus said, ignoring Voss. Omari recounted the entire event, the reading, the comment, what he said, and how nobody else reacted. Marcus listened attentively with his arms folded. When Omari finished, his father nodded once and asked, "Are you proud of what you did?" Omari looked up uncertainly. "I do not know." Marcus smiled slightly. "Well, I am." Then he faced Voss again. "Let me be clear. My son will not apologize for speaking out against disrespect. If the situation were reversed, you all would have already sent letters home." "I understand," Voss responded. "And honestly, I agree with you." "Then what are you going to do about it?" That question felt heavier than all the rest. Meanwhile, across the school building, Miss Harlow sat alone in her classroom. Her phone buzzed with messages from other teachers, though most remained unopened. Some offered her support, while others stayed silent. She replayed the incident over and over in her mind. Zoe's voice, her own words. Marcus standing up. She did not intend for things to go that way. That was what she constantly told herself. But no matter how many times she tried to reframe the memory, it always played out the same way. At the same time, the district office had already received 2 complaints from parents and an email requesting comment from the local newspaper. The next morning, the atmosphere at Pine Brook Junior High felt like it was on the edge. No formal announcements were made, yet both students and staff could sense it. Eyes shifted nervously, voices lowered. It was the kind of morning when people stopped each other in hallways, not to greet, but to confirm what they had heard. By second period, Jamie was summoned quietly to the principal's office. A student aide approached, holding a small white slip, as if it contained a secret. He stood hesitantly. He tucked his sketchbook beneath his arm and strode down the corridor as if he already anticipated what awaited him. Zoe Brooks was waiting there. She sat upright in a chair outside Principal Voss's office, legs crossed at the ankles. Her gaze remained fixed downward when Marcus Penn arrived, yet her hand twitched subtly in her lap, as though she wished to wave but hesitated. "Come on in," Mr. Voss invited. Inside the office, the walls were stark white, and the ticking clock sounded uncomfortably loud. Ms. Harlow sat on one side of the desk, arms crossed, holding a legal pad she hadn't written a word on. Opposite her were Marcus and Zoe. Jamie Grant and Tanya Brooks sat quietly beside their children, very much attentive despite their silence. "We are here to discuss this thoroughly," Voss started, his hands clasped together in front of him, a movement that seemed rehearsed. "Our aim is to ensure everyone's voice is heard, and that respect guides this conversation." Tanya did not waver. Respect to her would have meant having this meeting yesterday. "But please continue," she said. Clearing his throat, Voss turned to Ms. Harlow. "I believe it would be best if you begin by sharing your version of events." Harlow shifted uncomfortably, appearing smaller, less confident than usual. "I asked Zoe to read from the book. I thought her tone was unclear. I made an inappropriate remark. I was trying to steer her back on track." Tanya interrupted sharply. "You compared her to a rap battle." "Yes, I did," Harlow responded stiffly, "and I regret saying that." "That is not an apology, Jabril said quietly but firmly. At last, Marcus spoke. You did not correct her reading. Instead, you ridiculed her. You said it loudly enough for everyone to laugh if they wanted to. Zoe Brooks winced. That was not what I intended. But that was the outcome, Jamie Grant said, finally raising his voice. You made me feel like I was out of place here. For a moment, the silence was overwhelming. Too deep. The clock on the wall ticked on as if indifferent. Principal Voss interrupted. Ms. Harlow, this is not the first time we have received complaints about your choice of words in class. I have reviewed 2 earlier student grievances. I was not aware those were formal, she admitted, panic beginning to creep into her voice. They were recorded, Voss responded. But this is the first time the situation has become this serious, and it is clear we cannot ignore it. Am I being dismissed? She asked. That decision is not mine, he answered. However, you will be placed on administrative leave pending a district investigation. The room did not erupt. There was no yelling or celebration, just Tanya's slow exhale. Jabril slightly tilted his head. Marcus Penn reclined in his seat and stared directly at Ms. Harlow, not with pride or anger, but with certainty. Zoe quietly exhaled as her hands finally loosened in her lap. Ms. Harlow rose, nodded once, then turned and left the office. The door clicked softly behind her. Principal Voss faced the others. I regret that this happened. I truly do. And I am coordinating with the district to make sure this matter is addressed correctly. If either of your children, if you need any help, academic or personal, we will be here for you. Tanya glanced at her daughter. Zoe, do you want to return to class? She shook her head. Not today. Gabriel turned to Marcus. What about you? Marcus stared at the wall for a moment. Yeah, I'll go. Gradually, the room cleared out. The tension from the conversation still hung in the air, but something had changed. It was as if a bit of the pressure had been lifted. Meanwhile, down the hallway, students had already caught wind that Ms. Harlow was gone, and they had questions that no teacher could ignore any longer. By the time the 4th period came around, everyone was aware that Miss Harlow had been sent home. The news spread from classroom to classroom, whispered near lockers, and flashed across phone screens. No one knew if she would return. Some believed she had been dismissed. Others thought she was only suspended. A few joked that if she did come back, she probably would not remember any of their names. But not everyone was amused. In room 113, where Mr. Delvasio held social studies class, the lesson on Reconstruction faded away midway. He looked up from his presentation and noticed about 20 unfocused faces. He turned the projector off. All right, he said. Let's discuss what's on your minds. A few students looked up, surprised. Then Dave, who seldom spoke first, raised his hand. You heard what happened with Miss Harlow, right? Mr. Delvasio nodded slowly. I heard she was sent home. That is what I was told. Do you think what she said was racist? A girl, Aubrey called out from the back. I think it was harmful. He hesitated before speaking carefully. Whether intended or not, that was the impact of his words. When you hold power, the way people perceive your message often matters more than your actual intention. That comment calmed the atmosphere somewhat. However, in the teacher's lounge, opinions were divided. Mrs. C.R., who had been teaching at Pinerbrook almost as long as Ms. Harlow, stirred her tea more vigorously than needed. Deidre didn't mean it like that, she insisted. She was trying to make a point. Kids these days are just overly sensitive. Mr. Lamont, the assistant principal, placed his mug down firmly. No, this isn't about being sensitive. It's about being spoken to as if you're beneath someone else. That is not teaching. She was just strict and old-fashioned, nothing more. Looking Mrs. Cr. straight in the eye, he added, "No, Beverly, she was careless." This kind of incident was not new to the group. M. Glasper, the school counselor, had heard similar stories before. A few months earlier, a student named Kennedy had visited her upset after being told not to aim high for college and to consider technical schools instead. Ms. Harlow's name had come up, but Kennedy decided not to push the matter because her mother worked 2 jobs and didn't have time to fight for her. This issue was never officially addressed. There was also a situation 2 years earlier when Caleb used the word ain't during a class discussion. Ms. Harlow asked, "Is that the way they talk at home?" He did not report it either. Instead, he moved to a different class the next semester. These were the rumors whispered quietly. The stories that never reached the administration. One here, another there. Rarely enough to reveal a pattern. Until now. In the library, Mrs. Coulson began pulling out old yearbooks from the back shelf. She had worked at Pinebrook for nearly 2 decades. She had observed the subtle ways certain students received more praise than others, noticing how some kids were recognized for their intelligence, while others were praised for good behavior. The difference always seemed to depend on whose child it was and how they expressed themselves. Meanwhile, in the main office, Principal Voss was staring at an email printed from the district office. The subject was unremarkable: pending inquiry, classroom incident. Still, he knew this would not remain a minor issue, not at this moment. The real concern, he realized, was no longer about Ms. Harlow. It was about how many students had silently endured this kind of treatment and said nothing. How many had gone home feeling diminished, thinking, maybe it is just me. That was the part nobody wanted to acknowledge. Nearby, in the hallway close to the science labs, Zoe stood at her locker with her friend Jamie. "Do you think she will return?" Zoe asked. Jamie shrugged. "Does it really matter?" "Yes, it does to me. She made you feel like you were not smart," said Jamie. Zoe looked down and replied, "I know, but I still want to understand why she acted that way." Jamie fell silent. Perhaps it was not about fully comprehending her. Maybe it was about ensuring that no one else endures the same experience. Zoe Brooks nodded slowly in agreement. Yet, what neither of them realized was that a school board meeting had just been arranged for that coming Friday, and what unfolded afterward would extend well beyond the boundaries of Pinebrook. Friday evening arrived with a chill colder than usual for mid-March in Turut, Indiana. The parking lot outside the VO County School District headquarters was crowded long before 6 o'clock in the evening. Headlights pierced the fading light as parents, educators, and students filled the modest auditorium where the regular school board meeting was set to begin. This night was different. It was no longer just the usual attendees. The back rows were packed with teenagers wearing hooded sweatshirts, their sneakers softly tapping against the tiled floor. Along the sides stood parents clutching tote bags and coffee cups, eyes darting over the agenda as if it carried a solemn judgment. At the very front, surrounded by her lawyer and union representative, sat Ms. Harlow, her hair tightly pulled back and her posture rigid. She did not engage with anyone, and she did not need to. Her quiet presence spoke volumes. Principal Voss took a seat 2 rows behind her, alone. Gabriel Penn arrived accompanied by Marcus Penn. Gabriel wore the same brown coat he had on that morning at work, his expression calm but unreadable. Marcus walked beside him, hands tucked inside his pockets, eyes scanning the room in disbelief, as if the entire event was too surreal to accept. 10 minutes later, Tanya Brooks entered holding the hand of her daughter, Zoe. She walked alongside her a bit more slowly than usual, yet her head remained held high. Throughout the day, she had barely spoken, but something about being in that room made her stand taller. At exactly 6:15, the board chair, Leon Grahamley, tapped his gavel softly. "Let us begin this meeting." For the initial 15 minutes, they adhered to the agenda. Field trip budgets, textbook approvals, and facility maintenance. However, no one was paying attention. People browsed their phones, others whispered quietly. Everyone awaited a single topic. Eventually, it appeared: personnel review, Pine Brook Junior High incident. Rumors and whispers had already spread. Everyone present understood the implications. Mr. Gramley cleared his throat. "We have received several complaints about comments made by Ms. Harlow, a teacher at Pinebrook. We will now open the floor for public remarks." The queue formed swiftly. The first speaker was a woman named Shelley Byers, a former PTA president. She shared, "I have known Dedra for 15 years. Yes, she has been strict, but I do not believe she is racist. We should not ruin her career over a single mistake." Gentle sounds of agreement ran through the older attendees. Then Karen Willis, a black single mother of 2, stepped forward. "My son was in her class last year. One day, he came home asking if it was acceptable that he did not sound white enough. At the time, I did not press the issue. Now I regret it." The room fell silent. Next, a teacher, Mr. Delvicchio, took the floor. "I have collaborated with her before. I have stood up for her previously. Yet when a clear pattern begins to show, we owe it to our children to pay attention. We are teachers, not judges deciding who is worthy of respect." Marcus's name came up repeatedly. Some described him as courageous. Others claimed he crossed the line. A few avoided saying certain words directly, words like attitude, respect, and conduct. Then Jamie rose to speak. He did not sound like a politician. He did not pace or gesture wildly. He simply stated, "My son did not raise his voice. He did not lie. He defended someone who was humiliated. If that is not what we want our children to learn, then what is the purpose of all this?" He stepped down without waiting for a response. Tanya did not approach the microphone. She did not have to. Zoe moved forward instead. She walked slowly. Her voice was soft, but the microphone caught every word. "I do not want Ms. Harlow to lose her job because I dislike her. I just want to stop feeling like I have to diminish myself to make others comfortable. That is all." Someone near the back clapped once. Then another followed. The applause spread quietly, naturally, just enough. The board did not vote that evening. They said they would consider everything carefully, since the district needed to review all the information. Yet everyone understood the outcome was already unfolding. But as the crowd left into the chilly night, it was not the board's decision that felt most significant. It was that, for the first time, the students had been truly listened to. Monday morning carried a unique atmosphere. It was neither louder nor more chaotic, just more conscious. When the first bell sounded at Pine Brook Junior High, students entered their classrooms without the usual hurried footsteps or complaints. The hallway noise remained subdued. Teachers glanced up from their desks more frequently than normal. It was not fear, but a keen awareness. As if everyone had been reminded recently how delicate trust could be within these school walls. Zoe Brooks stepped into English class, taking her usual spot in the third row. However, a substitute was standing at the front, Mr. Nielsen, a retired educator from another middle school across the city. He welcomed the class with a gentle, tired smile and mentioned they would spend the next few days reading short stories. Nobody inquired about Ms. Harlowe's whereabouts. It was already understood. Zoe opened her notebook but refrained from writing. Her eyes wandered around the room, noticing Jamie Grant doodling in the corners of her folder, Davian wearing his hoodie pulled over his head and headphones peeking from beneath his collar. Then she looked toward the back where Marcus Penn's seat was empty. A tightening sensation gripped her chest before she saw him appear outside the window, holding a tardy slip. Marcus entered quietly, handed the note to the substitute, and took his seat while avoiding eye contact. 10 minutes slipped by, then 20. Near the class's end, Zoe raised her hand. Mr. Nielsen smiled kindly. "Yes, I would like to read something," she declared. After a brief pause, he answered, "Certainly." She rose calmly with focused determination. Then she flipped open her notebook and began sharing a poem she had composed over the weekend. The voice emerged stronger than anyone had anticipated. It was not really about Ms. Harlowe, not directly anyway. It concerned voices. Those that people often try to silence, the ones told they are excessive, too loud, or not quite the right kind of clever. It was about reclaiming your breath when someone's words attempt to drain the air from your lungs. Halfway through, Jamie glanced up. By the final line, Marcus had raised his head as well. When Zoe took her seat, nobody applauded. That was not the intention. The quiet that followed was the kind that showed minds were actually engaged, truly reflecting. Later that day, Principal Voss stopped by their classroom for just a short moment. He expressed his gratitude for how they had handled the past week's challenges. Then he handed out a flyer announcing a student forum about what respect looks like in their school. The open discussion would take place next Thursday, led by students but open to staff as well. He mentioned it was optional, yet something in his tone suggested it was far more than just another school event. During lunch, Marcus finally approached Zoe. "That poem, it felt genuine," he admitted. She met his gaze and replied, "Thanks. I wasn't sure if I should read it," he shrugged. "You did. That's what counts." Then more softly, "I don't think I've ever spoken that much at school before last week." "You shouldn't have needed to," she responded. "But I'm glad you did." The remainder of lunch passed with quiet conversation. No gossip, no rumors, just honest dialogue, things people had never felt safe enough to share until now. Meanwhile, in the faculty room, a certain type of discussion was underway. Ms. Glasper was gaining attention for organizing a professional growth session focused on unconscious bias. Dr. Delvsio had volunteered to assist with leading it. Even those educators who had previously supported Ms. Harlowe were now more reserved. They were not silent, but clearly uncertain about their stance. Meanwhile, somewhere in the district office, a resignation letter awaited processing. Ms. Harlowe had decided to retire ahead of schedule. The school board did not need to vote because the mounting pressure had already achieved its effect. That afternoon, As buses departed and children filled the sidewalks, someone wrote a simple message in chalk near the main entrance. It was nothing elaborate, just 3 words, uneven but unmistakable. We still matter. However, Pinebrook's lesson extended beyond a single teacher. It concerned every small moment when someone chooses to voice their thoughts and the quiet that falls when they remain silent. Weeks went by, yet the influence remained strong. Zoe returned to her daily life, but it no longer felt the same. She continued reading her books and quietly taking notes during class. But something inside her had changed. She no longer lowered her voice when speaking or shrank in her seat. Even when teachers called on her without warning, she held their gaze firmly. Passing by the English classroom, now permanently managed by a new teacher, she did not avert her eyes. At the very first student-led forum, over 50 students attended. Half of them remained silent, yet their presence spoke volumes. They gathered in folding chairs inside the library and listened to their peers share what it feels like to be underestimated. They described the pain of constantly being corrected, yet rarely truly listened to. They explained how frustrating it is to be told that the way they speak is wrong. As though language belonged exclusively to a particular group, Marcus stood near the back for most of the session. He had not intended to speak, but near the end someone asked why he had said something earlier that day. Without hesitation he replied, "I did not say it for recognition. I said it because no one else did." He wanted to make sure she understood she was not alone in that space. After that, there were more gatherings, one every month. Then, faculty started attending 2 times a month. Not every teacher was comfortable with this. Some remained silent throughout. Others asked questions that made students sigh, but at least they were present. Change did not arrive with sudden explosions. It unfolded gradually and quietly through difficult conversations, in moments when students corrected teachers and faced no punishment for it. Change came when the school introduced new training focused on racial awareness and, most importantly, allowed students to lead segments of it. In one corridor near the 8th grade lockers, a bulletin board appeared titled, "Words That Matter." Students could post phrases that made them feel either seen or diminished. A few teachers contributed as well. Some of the statements were painful to read. Comments like, "She speaks well for a black girl" were among them. "Are you certain you belong in honors? You do not fit in with the others." Every sentence was handwritten, raw and genuine, a stark reminder of what had been endured silently for far too long. Zoe carefully read each note and then added her own. It simply said, "I do not want to sound ghetto." She left it anonymous. Her name was unnecessary. Marcus stood beside her as she did this. "Do you think they are paying attention now?" he asked. "Some of them are," she answered. "That is a beginning." Later that day, a freshman from a different school reached out to Marcus on social media. He said he had seen the story online and that his cousin attended Pinebrook. He shared that Marcus's words inspired him to speak up in class as well. He was sent out for it, but declared he would do it again. Marcus responded, "Do it every time. That is something they never teach you in school. The power of your voice, especially when it trembles, especially when you stand alone, especially when the room falls silent afterward and you refuse to sit back down." Ms. Harlow never came back. She quietly left, sending an email to thank the district for the chance to serve. There were no farewell celebrations, no cake in the staff room, just a fresh start in a classroom that would never forget its former days. The district issued a vague press release. Yet the story of Pinebrook did not need loud headlines. It lived in the halls, in the students who now asked more questions, noticed more details, and no longer laughed off remarks that previously went unchallenged. In Zoe Brooks's final writing assignment of the year, she composed an essay called "When Someone Finally Stood Up." While it did not mention any names, everyone who read it clearly understood who it was about. The closing sentence was straightforward. "I used to believe that staying silent kept me safe. Now I understand it only makes others feel at ease." Not all stories conclude with fairness or a grand solution, yet they ignite a beginning. Sometimes initiating change is the strongest action one can take. If you think stories like those of Zoe and Marcus Penn are important, do not remain quiet. Share their experiences, discuss them openly, and above all, take a stand when it feels most difficult. Subscribe for more touching human stories that challenge perspectives, create connections, and reveal the true meaning of bravery.